It's June 4th, 1942, around 9 in the morning in Berlin. Hitler's sitting in the Reich Chancellery Operations Wing, going through his usual morning military updates reports, coming in from all over Europe and beyond. Most of it's about the Eastern Front, as usual. But there's this one intelligence summary from the Pacific, passed along through German naval contacts and intercepted signals. It talks about a Japanese operation happening right now at some remote atoll called Midway, northwest of Hawaii. The Imperial Japanese Navy's engaging American carrier forces as they speak. The information's patchy at best, cautious, holding back. Nobody's declaring victory or defeat yet. Just mentioning contact, losses, uncertainty. For months now, German leadership figured Japanese naval dominance was basically a done deal. Pearl Harbor, back in December, 41 seemed to prove that. 4 months later, German intelligence still figured Japan had the Pacific locked down and that American carrier strength was pretty much crushed. That belief shaped everything, especially the thinking that America would stay stretched thin, split between two oceans, too slow to throw its full weight at Europe. Inside the German High Command, these first Midway reports don't set off any alarms. The wording's technical, careful, filtered through Japanese channels that focus on engagement rather than results. Aircraft losses mentioned, but no totals. Carrier movements described, but nothing confirmed about damage. The battles described as ongoing. At this point, nobody in Berlin's talking disaster. What they do notice, though, is the absence of the usual Japanese claims of crushing success. Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the Armed Forces High Command, gets the same intelligence summary right after Hitler. He's spent most of the morning reviewing logistics from the Eastern Front, where they're prepping for another summer offensive. To Keitel, Midway seems like a sideshow at first. Germany's war, the way he sees it, gets decided on land in the East. The Pacific's Japan's problem. But even in these early hours, Keitel picks up on something off. Japanese communications are coming slower. Claims are more careful. There's no certainty. By midday, more intercepts and diplomatic cables arrive. They don't clear things up, they muddy them. One report mentions significant Japanese aircraft losses. Another suggests American carriers weren't caught at anchor like at Pearl Harbor. They were already at sea, actively fighting back. This detail matters. It hints at preparation, good intelligence, operational skill on the American side. For German planners used to writing off American military capability, this is uncomfortable news. Alfred Jodl, head of operations, starts paying closer attention as the intelligence evolves. Jodl's long argued that underestimating the United States is a mistake. He sees war as a system, not just individual battles, and he's tuned into shifts in momentum. The lack of clear Japanese success worries him more than confirmed losses would. In modern warfare, silence often means damage control. Jodl starts asking for follow-up reports, especially about carrier losses. He doesn't get anything reassuring. As the afternoon rolls on, the internal briefings adjust their language. Now the battle's described as costly. American resistance is unexpectedly strong. Japanese objectives are contested rather than achieved. Still, no outright admission of defeat. This restraint's partly uncertainty, partly how the Japanese military communicates. They're designed to project authority and confidence, especially to allies. German officers get this, but they also notice what's missing. Within Hitler's inner circle, there's not much discussion. Hitler himself shows barely any reaction. He's known for focusing on immediate priorities and brushing off bad news until it can't be ignored anymore. The Pacific theater's way, outside his direct control, but the strategic implications are clear enough. If American carriers are still operational, the United States still has offensive punch. If Japan couldn't destroy them, then America's industrial machine gets time to work. By early evening, a more detailed assessment comes through naval intelligence channels. It suggests at least one Japanese carrier's been badly damaged, possibly lost. The reports marked unconfirmed, no numbers attached. Even so, it's serious. German naval planners have studied carrier warfare closely, what it means for sea control and power projection. Losing a carrier isn't a tactical setback. It's a strategic blow. Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's submarine fleet, reviews this information later that night. He's long seen American shipbuilding capacity as the central problem Germany will eventually face. Submarine warfare depends on attrition and time. If the United States keeps its naval core and speeds up production, time works against Germany. Midway, even without full clarity, suggests American naval leadership's learning faster than expected. By the end of June 4th, Berlin hasn't issued any formal conclusions. No statements made. No adjustments announced. But among senior officers, a quiet reassessment's underway. The war they pictured, where Japan holds the Pacific and Germany defeats the Soviet Union before American power fully kicks in now, has a serious question mark. The assumption of uninterrupted Japanese success can't be taken for granted anymore. What goes unspoken that night is the bigger implication. If American carriers survived and dealt major damage, then the United States isn't just in the war, it's actively shaping it. For the first time since December 1941, German commanders have to consider that the global balance they counted on might already be shifting out of their hands. 2 days after those first Pacific reports, a consolidated intelligence assessment lands on the desks of Germany's top command. The uncertainty from day one's been replaced by confirmation. 4 Japanese fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu destroyed near Midway. Hundreds of experienced pilots and deck crews gone. The American carriers involved are still operational. This engagement's no longer contested. It's identified as a decisive Japanese defeat. Adolf Hitler gets the report during a scheduled military conference. The setting's familiar senior commanders around a long table, maps of the Eastern Front dominating the room. The Pacific update's delivered as a secondary item, but it immediately disrupts the meeting's rhythm. Hitler doesn't interrupt. He listens. His reaction's restrained, but his body language shifts. He asks questions not about Japan's losses, but about American capabilities. How many carriers were involved? How fast can they build replacements? Does this show luck or skill? For Hitler, Midway's significance isn't the Pacific theater itself, it's what it reveals about the United States. His worldview's long rested on the idea that America's industrially powerful, but strategically slow, politically divided, culturally unprepared for sustained war. Pearl Harbor seemed to confirm that. Midway challenges it. The battle suggests intelligence penetration, quick decision-making, coordinated carrier operations under pressure. These aren't traits of an unprepared opponent. Wilhelm Keitel picks up on the shift in tone immediately. The conversation moves away from Japan's mistakes and toward American potential. It's an uncomfortable direction. German plannings depended on time to defeat the Soviet Union, time to exhaust Britain, time to keep American involvement limited to material support. Midway suggests time's no longer on their side. Alfred Jodl addresses the implications head-on. He notes Japan's lost, not just ships, but irreplaceable people. Carrier warfare depends on trained air crews and experienced deck officers. These losses can't be replaced quickly. The United States, meanwhile, hasn't lost equivalent assets. Its industrial systems already expanding. Shipyards on both coasts are running at unprecedented pace. Jodl doesn't speculate, he states measurable facts. Carrier construction schedules, aircraft production figures, training pipelines. The contrast's stark. Hitler reacts defensively. He criticizes Japanese operational planning, suggests the loss reflects bad tactics rather than systemic weakness. He argues the war in Europe remains decisive, and that Japan's role is to tie down American forces, not win the war alone. Yet even as he speaks, the strategic balance he's describing is under strain. Japan was supposed to eliminate American naval power in the Pacific, not just delay it. Karl Donitz listens carefully. His focus is narrower, but no less important. Submarine warfare against American shipping depends on assumptions about escort availability, ship replacement rates, naval priorities. If the United States keeps its carriers and accelerates production, convoy protection improves. Losses that once seemed sustainable become unacceptable. Donitz understands industrial war favors whoever can absorb damage without falling apart. Midway suggests America has that capacity. Inside German Navy planning offices, Midway prompts a quiet reevaluation of long-term expectations. The assumption that Japan will dominate the Pacific indefinitely gets quietly removed from internal documents. New assessments describe the Pacific War as dynamic rather than settled. This language shift matters. It signals recognition that American forces aren't just recovering, they're adapting. For Hitler, the psychological impact's delayed but deep. He's always believed willpower and ideological commitment can overcome material disadvantage. Midway contradicts this by showing that organization, intelligence, and production can reverse initial weakness. The United States entered the war late, but it didn't enter blindly. Its naval command already learned from defeat. As the conference ends, no orders are issued in response to Midway. There's no operational adjustment Germany can make in the Pacific, but the illusion of predictability's been broken. The war's no longer unfolding the way Germany expected. The enemy Hitler dismissed as soft and indecisive has shown clarity and resolve. That evening, internal memos circulate among senior planners. They don't use dramatic language. They don't predict defeat. They do, however, revise timelines. They extend estimates. They acknowledge risk. These documents will never be read to the public. They're for those who understand what's changed. Midway hasn't altered the battlefield in Europe. Soviet armies still stand in the east. British bombers still hit German cities. But the horizon's shifted. The United States has shown itself as an active, capable enemy. The war Germany wanted to wrap up quickly is becoming a war of endurance. And endurance, more than courage or ideology, will decide who's left standing when belief alone isn't enough. In the days and weeks after Midway, the language inside Germany's senior command shifts in tone and content. Publicly, nothing's said. Official communications keep emphasizing confidence, resolve, inevitable victory. Privately, though, the senior military leadership starts speaking with a clarity that's been missing since the war's early days. Midway becomes a fixed reference point in internal discussions, not because of where it happened or who fought, but because of what it shows about the enemy Germany now faces. Alfred Jodl records his concerns in operational memos circulated only among top planning staff. He doesn't dwell on Japan's mistakes. Instead, he focuses on the American response. He notes American carrier forces weren't just present, but properly positioned, meaning successful intelligence work and command discipline. He points out American naval aviation pulled off coordinated strikes under pressure, achieving decisive results in a narrow time window. For Jodl, this suggests an enemy that learns, one capable of correcting mistakes quickly. He doesn't frame this as a future risk. He frames it as a present reality. Wilhelm Keitel's remarks during staff conferences are more guarded but equally revealing. He emphasizes accelerating operations in the East, arguing Germany must achieve decisive results before American strength gets fully applied. His urgency reflects an understanding shared by many in the room. The war's timeline's no longer open-ended. Midway's shortened it. Every month without resolution now favors the enemy. Within naval command circles, Karl Donitz is increasingly blunt. He argues the United States has shown it can absorb losses without strategic collapse. That's the key advantage of an industrial power operating far from its homeland. Donitz warns submarine successes will be temporary unless they can overwhelm production targets. He admits privately that's unlikely. American shipbuilding figures keep rising. Escort numbers increase. Training programs expand. Midway reinforces his belief the United States is organizing for a war measured in years, not campaigns. These discussions aren't emotional, but they're unmistakably anxious. The generals no longer debate whether the United States can fight effectively. They debate how long Germany can delay the inevitable concentration of American power in Europe. This shift marks a psychological turning point. The enemy is no longer abstract or underestimated. It's defined, measured, increasingly respected. Adolf Hitler's presence complicates these conversations. In formal conferences, he keeps expressing confidence in Germany's destiny, dismissing concerns about American intervention as exaggerated. He blames Midway on Japanese tactical errors rather than American skill. Yet his private behavior suggests awareness of deeper problems. He interrupts briefings more often. He demands production figures. He questions assumptions that used to go unchallenged. His need for control intensifies as his certainty crumbles. Among the generals, there's no unified response. Some cling to the belief decisive victory in the East will make American power irrelevant. Others doubt this openly, though only in restricted settings. What unites them is recognizing Germany's now fighting a global war against an opponent with unmatched resources and proven adaptability. Midway becomes shorthand for that reality. The most revealing statements don't happen in formal meetings, but in marginal notes, after-action reviews, private correspondence. These documents reflect professional military assessment stripped of ideology. They acknowledge Japan's carrier losses are irreplaceable in the near term. They recognize American training pipelines are expanding faster than Axis planners expected. They accept the technological gaps narrowing, not widening. Nobody talks about surrender. Nobody predicts outright defeat. But the language of inevitability starts appearing carefully, indirectly. Phrases about unfavorable ratios, extended timelines, cumulative disadvantages recur with increasing frequency. These aren't the words of men who think the war can be shaped at will. These are the words of men who understand control slipping. Midway also changes how German generals view coordination within the Axis alliance. The assumption of parallel success gets replaced by concern over divergent capacity. Japan's loss exposes the vulnerability of relying on an ally whose industrial base can't match its opponent. The war is no longer synchronized. It's fragmented, uneven, increasingly hard to manage. As summer moves forward, these internal assessments grow darker. The Eastern Front demands huge resources. Air defense strains under increasing Allied bombing. Submarine losses mount. Midway doesn't cause these pressures, but it clarifies their trajectory. It confirms the enemy is not just resisting, but improving. For the German generals who see this clearly, Midway marks the moment professional judgment overtakes ideological certainty. They keep serving. They keep planning. But beneath their discipline lies an understanding the war's balance has shifted in a way that can't be reversed by will alone. What they don't yet know is how long the war will last, or how complete the consequences will be. They know only that the old assumptions no longer hold, and that the future will be shaped by forces beyond their control. Inside German planning offices, Midway's consequences are no longer discussed as a single naval defeat. They're treated as evidence of a structural imbalance that can't be fixed. Strategic memos drafted in summer 1942 start reflecting a new understanding of the war's direction. The focus shifts from achieving victory to managing risk, delaying collapse, extracting maximum effect from shrinking resources. Midway stands as confirmation that time once Germany's ally now works against it. Alfred Jodl reviews updated production figures alongside operational forecasts. The numbers are precise and brutal. American aircraft output keeps climbing. Shipyards expand capacity rather than just replacing losses. Training programs scale up with industrial growth. These trends aren't speculative, they're measurable. Jodl recognizes even flawless execution on Germany's part can't close the gap. Modern war, he understands, isn't decided by brilliance alone, but by sustained output and replacement. Midway shows the United States can suffer early losses and still come out stronger. Within Naval Command, Karl Dönitz pushes for intensified submarine warfare as the only lever Germany is left. He argues the Atlantic remains the decisive theater where American power can be disrupted before it reaches Europe in full force. Yet even Dönitz admits the limits of this strategy. Escort technology improves, air coverage expands, loss rates rise. The balance between ships sunk and submarines lost grows less favorable each month. Midway reinforces his fear the United States won't be delayed long enough to matter. For Wilhelm Keitel, the implications are operational rather than abstract. He urges acceleration on all fronts, faster offenses, greater risk acceptance. He believes only decisive action can prevent American, British, and Soviet power from converging. But these recommendations hit reality hard. Logistics strain under expansion. Fuel shortages increase. Manpower losses pile up. The system's already stretched to its limits. Midway doesn't create these problems, but it removes the illusion they can be overcome through initiative alone. Adolf Hitler responds to these assessments with increasing rigidity. He rejects proposals implying strategic contraction or prioritization. He insists willpower and resolve can offset material disadvantage. Yet his directives become more detailed, more intrusive, less flexible. This behavior reflects pressure rather than confidence. He senses the margin for errors vanished. Midway's shown the enemy doesn't need to be superior everywhere to be decisive. It just needs to endure. The German military starts understanding the wars entered a phase where outcomes get determined cumulatively. Each loss compounds the next. Each delay benefits the enemy. Midway exemplifies this shift. Japan's loss of 4 carriers can't be reversed quickly, if at all. The experienced crews are gone. The training pipeline can't replace them in time. Meanwhile, American carriers stay active, supported by expanding infrastructure. The asymmetry's clear. Strategic discussions increasingly reference the concept of irreversibility. Certain thresholds, once crossed, can't be restored. Midway's identified as one such threshold. It signals the point where American naval power moves from recovery to expansion. For Germany, this means the prospect of keeping the United States permanently divided between oceans has failed. American forces will eventually concentrate. The question's no longer if, but when. This realization changes the tone of German planning. Optimistic projections disappear. Contingency planning becomes dominant. Leaders talk less about shaping events, more about responding to them. The language of inevitability grows more common, though never publicly acknowledged. The war Germany hoped to wrap up through speed and shock is transforming into a prolonged struggle of attrition against an opponent uniquely built to endure it. Midway also reframes the moral dimension of the conflict for some within the German officer corps. They start seeing ideology can't manufacture resources or replace skilled labor. Belief doesn't produce steel, fuel, or trained pilots. The United States fights not from desperation, but from capacity. This distinction matters. It means the enemy's strength will increase over time rather than fade. By late summer, Midway's no longer debated. It's accepted. It becomes part of the baseline all future planning proceeds from. The war's now understood as unwinnable through conventional means, though this conclusion stays confined to private thought. Duty, discipline, hierarchy ensure operations continue. Orders get obeyed, plans get drafted. But beneath this structure lies awareness, the outcomes slipping beyond control. What Midway ultimately represents for German leadership isn't defeat but exposure. It reveals the true nature of the conflict they've entered, a war not decided by singular victories, but by accumulation of capacity over time. A war where Germany's strengths are finite and its enemies are expanding. The question lingering now isn't how to win, but how long the system can hold before the imbalance becomes impossible to hide. By the end of 1942, Midway's disappeared from public German discourse. It's not mentioned in speeches, newspapers, official war summaries. No explanations offered. No lessons acknowledged. The event exists only in internal documents and private understanding. For German military leadership, Midway is no longer a shock. It's become a quiet reference point, a moment fixed in memory as the first clear signal the war's direction can't be reversed. Adolf Hitler keeps talking about ultimate victory. His public rhetoric grows more insistent, more absolute as the strategic situation worsens. He demands loyalty, sacrifice, belief. Yet his decisions increasingly reflect constraint rather than confidence. He rejects withdrawal, refuses prioritization, insists on holding ground regardless of cost. This rigidity isn't the posture of a leader expanding opportunities. It's the posture of someone trying to deny loss of control. Midway stays unspoken, but its lesson underlies every narrowing option. Within the senior officer corps, the knowledge gained in 1942 deepens into resignation. Alfred Jodl keeps planning operations with professional rigor, but his assessments now assume prolonged conflict against materially superior enemies. He focuses on efficiency, coordination, damage limitation. The language of possibilities been replaced by the language of management. The war's no longer framed as something to be won quickly, but as something to be endured as long as possible. Wilhelm Keitel, bound closely to Hitler's authority, suppresses doubts and enforces obedience. He understands the implications of Midway and the expanding American role. Yet his position allows no deviation. The system he serves depends on discipline, not dissent. Silence becomes a form of survival within the command structure. What can't be changed isn't discussed openly. What's known is carried privately. Karl Dönitz continues his Atlantic campaign with determination, even as losses mount. American shipbuilding outpaces sinkings. Escort tactics improve. Air coverage closes the gaps submarines once exploited. Dönitz sees the pattern clearly. The enemy absorbs damage and grows stronger. The imbalance identified after Midway has matured into dominance. Still, he presses forward, not because he believes victory is achievable, but because the system demands action until it collapses. Among German planners, Midway comes to represent the moment outcomes became cumulative and irreversible. It's understood as the point where American power began moving from potential to application. The United States doesn't rush. It builds, it trains, it coordinates. By the time American forces appear in decisive strength in Europe, the outcome's already shaped by years of preparation. Those who understood this early carry the burden of foresight without agency. As Allied bombing intensifies and the Eastern Front drains manpower and material, the awareness first sharpened by Midway spreads quietly through the upper ranks. There's no single moment of acknowledgement, no collective admission. The truth settles gradually through patterns, figures, repeated confirmation. The war Germany hoped to control through speed and will has become a process driven by attrition and capacity. The contrast between public narrative and private understanding grows wider. Propaganda promises salvation. Internal documents calculate depletion. Officers keep serving, bound by oath and structure, even as belief erodes. This coexistence of duty and doubt defines the final years of the war for Germany's leadership. They're no longer fighting for victory, as they once defined it. They're fighting to postpone the inevitable. Midway's place in this story isn't dramatic in hindsight. No German cities burned because of it. No armies retreat immediately. Its power lies in what it revealed, early to those trained to see patterns rather than headlines. It exposed the fundamental imbalance at the heart of the conflict. An imbalance ideology couldn't correct and courage couldn't offset. When the war finally ended in Europe in 1945, the outcome shocked civilians, but not those who'd studied the numbers years earlier. For them, The conclusion had been visible since the moment American carriers survived and struck back in the Pacific. Midway didn't end the war. It clarified it? The generals who understood this carried the knowledge in silence, continuing to serve a system that couldn't adapt to the reality it faced. Their words, preserved in internal records and private reflections, reveal a war already lost, long before it was publicly conceded. And in that silence lies the enduring lesson of Midway, that modern war is decided not by belief or declaration, but by capacity, adaptation, and time. Subscribe for more deeply researched, human-centered documentaries revealing the unseen truths behind history's turning points.